You're listening to Requiem Metal Podcast, and you've heard Der Weg einer Freiheit, new song off their Finisterre album called Aufbruch.
And this is German Metal Part 3 with our featured guest, Chris Dick.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
The first person to announce anything besides me, because I don't want to pronounce German.
Yeah. So I think that was the first.
Finisterre.
There might have been an episode where I accidentally started before we had a formula. I don't even know. But probably not.
If somebody can go back and tell us which episode, we'll give you a prize.
Exactly, yeah, we'll give you a prize. Some prize.
Something real good.
Yeah. That was pretty scathing, right, Chris? Right out the bat. You know, you get these crazy black metal blast beats. I mean, I mentioned Frost. You mentioned it reminded you of old
Marduk and
with
like
Legion.
With like Panzer Division era super, hyper blast shit.
Yeah, and then you get some cool, interesting tremolo riff kind of things starting to happen in there. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Am I wrong in saying I kind of heard some Wolves in the Throne Room and some of that kind of left of center kind of style of black metal in there? I might be crazy.
The Cascadian style?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of that. Especially the second half of the song a little bit.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah, I think there's some Wolves in there.
It's more raw. It's got more like Dark Throne rawness and Marduk rawness than those bands.
But there's that picturesque thing happening. I mean, and I think that might be kind of common of a post-movement.
That's true. Would you associate these guys in the post movement, or where did they fall as we start to get into part 3?
They're sort of in the middle. They do the all out blasting sort of savage black metal thing, but they also sort of go on the other side and do a little bit more sort of the rustic. Looking at the fjord kind of concept,
gotcha.
Or the mountains,
and that's maybe where I got the Pacific vibes a little too, because they're more like focused on nature.
And there's the shimmery guitar where it borderlines from being like obnoxious to kind of like hypnotic.
Yeah, Agalak, and like you said, Wolves did, the Cascadian sort of riffs and things. So besides us not being able to pronounce the name of this band, where are they connected to other bands, or do they feature members from some of the other acts that we've kind of talked about or will talk about? Or
they do not, as far as I can tell. But they're Bavarians, so they're from southern Germany, which is kind of where some of this stuff is maybe focused, I guess, or not focused, but sort of bubbling under.
Sure,
for the most part, compared to other things. So, as far as I can tell, they're a single entity band that they have ex-members or they're ex-members of other bands. But I mean, Frostgrim is probably the most famous, I guess, of the bands that they're formerly known of, and that's another underground band with one release, and it was not that special.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I didn't know much about these guys compared to some of the other bands we'll be playing through this third part episode. So,
they like to be in bands that had "fuck" in the name, by the way. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah, the main guy Nikita was in a band called "Fuck Your Shadow from Behind."
That's
a little wordy, belabored point there.
There's a lot of things happening with that statement.
And then Tobias, who's the drummer, was in a band is in a band called "Fuck You and Die." So maybe there's a little nihilism going on.
Yeah, or big fans of like early Voivod, "Fuck Off and Die" and some of that kind of stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, everyone's a fan of Voivod at some point in their life. So
True.
So is this their first release then?
No, this is their fourth release.
Okay, so they've been around for a little bit then.
Yeah, since 2010, I think, is the first full length.
But this one was on who put this out?
Season.
I was going to say is this the first one where they've made it to kind of a bigger label with Seasons in the Mist?
Nope, the last record, Stellar, was on.
That was on there as well.
Yeah,
all right. Gotcha.
And they had 2 records, I think, on Viva Hate, which is another sort of underground German label that did. I think they were doing a lot of box sets, like those big sort of deluxe collector's edition box sets. I think the Agalak box set came out on Vita Hate.
They do that Emperor one,
the Enslaved one.
Did they do Emperor? That's
no, that was Blood Music.
Okay.
Huh, that's kind of cool.
I think they did Catatonia. Opeth Wooden Box, yeah. So, yeah, I'm just looking. They did a lot of what they call the Wooden Box series. So it was Opeth, Enslaved, Agalak.
Gotcha. It's kind of hobby, like a hobby label almost.
Yeah, but they did a lot of They did a lot of stuff for Pelican too.
I don't think they none of those they barely broke even on each release or something. They were so ridiculous.
I mean, they're wooden boxes with 12-inch vinyl in them. It's like
wow,
they're expensive. I mean, they were expensive back then. I can imagine.
But they're like full discography box sets too, aren't they?
I believe so. At least for the not only up to certain records. Like I think it was like Opeth was just the candlelight ones.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, it was just Orchid, Morning, Rise in My Arms, or Hers. They didn't have the rights to do anything after that.
Okay.
Because those are
Peaceful
you get,
other
then you get
band,
into, music, peaceful music for nations.
Yeah.
Then you get into Roadrunner.
So if you're just joining us for some odd reason and you skipped part 1 and part 2, kind of what we've been doing is patchworking together this sort of unique moment in time for the German metal scene in the last decade or so. Really 2 decades, kind of.
Yeah.
If you go back to the early 2000s,
Yep, exactly.
where a lot of this sort of stuff kind of started. But so we've been kind of spotlighting a random assortment of bands over part 1 and part 2 that all kind of bring something different or unique to the table. And it's been kind of tough, to draw sort of a thread through all of it because there's probably isn't a thread there, as Chris has kind of alluded to. But there are definitely some common nods that you're kind of hearing here and there. And I think especially in this next set of music, the first 2 bands that kind of open up our next set are, I think, 2 of the ones that I was more drawn to right off the bat, which is Chapel of Disease and Secrets of the Moon. Mm-hmm. So I think there's probably a lot to unpack, especially Secrets of the Moon here. So where do these 2 bands kind of like come into the mix? The Chapel of the Disease, is this their first release, or they've been around as well for a while?
Chapel, this is the first release.
Okay, so this is a debut for them, and a great album title, and it's pretty long. And as we have seen the storm, we have embraced the eye.
Oh, sorry, it's not the first. The first album, Van, but it's the 3rd record.
Oh, okay. So Van, the one German label,
yeah,
which I just ordered some material from last night.
That you couldn't understand.
You were asleep, so I could not ask you to translate. So I was like clicking on things, hoping to God that I'm getting the shit shipped to my house. And I was gonna wake you up, but I was like,
you should.
You look too comfortable.
Metal.
So yeah, too much metal.
Yeah,
so,
yesterday was too much metal.
Too much metal, yeah. We did have some...
After that Cause of Death show, you got to kind of take a nap.
I mean, it really, what do you need after Obituary, Cause of Death? I kind of feel bad for Baroness, because A, the 3 of us aren't really that big into Baroness, and B, anyone who is probably felt so satisfied after Obituary, they're like, They talk about that in wrestling, that you have to organize your sets. You don't want like a really dynamic match back to back because people won't appreciate the second one because they're so burnt out from the first one that you have to give what's called a popcorn match. So they should have like inserted like a small band before Baroness to like sort of cleanse the palate,
right? Yeah.
Or whatever, like a palate cleanse type thing.
The last band you want to be is the cleanse a palate band.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but I'm saying like before Baroness went on, give them like a little short set or something.
Right,
but
body count or something.
So what's going on with Chapel of Disease here? The from a standpoint of,
well, I think that they started to evolve, right? If you look at the first 2 records on FDA, which, nobody probably really knew that much about. They were interesting, but they weren't like great.
Mm-hmm.
I think only over the last, since 2015 when they released Mysterious Ways of Repetitive Art, which is also an interesting record, but I think it's nothing like this one.
Yeah.
This new record just has like something about it. It's got a feel to it that they're finally understanding what they want to write about, which is typical Lovecraftian, ancient horrors coming from the depths kind of stuff.
Sure. I mean, the song we're gonna play is called "Song of the Gods," so you kind of have that overarching theme that we've hit on part 1 and 2.
Right.
In terms of musical stuff, I mean, there's a lot of different things kind of happening that jumped out to me. I even hear like a catchy, that sort of Kveltertak.
Kveltertak?
Yeah, I hear a little bit of that sort of.
The major chords. They're minor chords.
Yeah.
It's like that triumphant sound.
Gloria Belli, as well. Like again, the kind of weird mixture of sort of like southern rock or southern sludge mixed with like black metal.
French black metal.
Yeah. Even like a little bit of the kind of triumphantness of like especially the last decade or 2 of Rotting Christ, that sort of like uplifting kind of Mediterranean Hellenic kind of black metal sound, which isn't like grim necessarily, like but a little bit more kind of mixed with like morbid cron and even horrendous kind of stuff kind of going on in this.
Yeah.
What are you hearing, Chris? Because you've spent more time with it.
You just mentioned the band I was going to mention, so morbid cron.
Okay.
So I hear another band trying to think outside the box and not putting parameters around what death metal song should sound like or be like. So you know, just like Morbus Crown, you got other bands that we're talking about here throughout our set that are doing things differently, right?
Yeah.
They've definitely upped the logo game on Death. Have you seen the Chapel of Disease?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Well, Chapel of Disease is the two Morbid Angel song titles. It's a
Yeah.
portmanteau, those two song titles, like Chapel of Ghouls and...
Oh, that's
Angel
cool.
of Disease.
So that was
Angel
like
of Disease.
super intentional then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you talked to these guys then?
No.
No? Okay.
No, not yet.
They've got a spiderweb, a pentagram, an open door, somebody coming out of the ground, crypt, upside down cross, dripping blood. I mean, all the hallmarks of a good logo.
Yeah, every cliche you can possibly
So they're
have.
taking like Scream Bloody Gore
Just missing
kind of
a tail.
stuff and just kind of going...
Yeah, there's no
into
double
the-
tail on it. I'm just kind of surprised.
That's sadness.
Yeah. But I mean, like, these guys are kind of like, you know, what Horrendous are kind of doing here in the States, which is also different. I guess what Death did, what Tribulation we're doing on Formulas of Death.
Yeah, I wrote down kind of earlier Tribulation. I hear
Yeah.
that in some of the leads in
Yeah.
the song. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's cool to hear bands thinking outside the box, so without really a concern for what might work and what doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, which is kind of like that whole Afflicted concept. You know, like the Prodigal Son concept, where some of it just doesn't make any sense, but otherwise it's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
You know.
Would you throw like Disharmonic Orchestra and some of those kind of
Yeah,
bands?
I would
into
say
that
those
mix?
are all the originators of this, you know, bizarre land death metal.
Yeah, for sure. And then we get to Seekers of the Moon, which is kind of a band I've been waiting to kind of talk about because maybe out of all of this stuff is the band that kind of jumped out the most to me in terms of like I've listened to the most of their back catalog and they're just I don't know they're like tailor made for the kind of stuff that I tend to gravitate to, you know,
Right.
as like a fan of all types of music, not just metal, but you know, darkish metal, you know, whatever you want to kind of call it. So
Right.
where I think that they seem like kind of a tentpole band for a lot of
They
this
are.
scene. So kind of where's that web kind of spring forth?
Well, it started, I guess, in the late 90s and then sort of got its genesis in the early 2000s where things really started to kind of kick off in a very typical black metal way. I mean, it was uncompromising in German black metal. It was, you know, the first album, I'm looking at it now, Stronghold of the Inviolables, which is also kind of a weird word to pronounce.
Maybe a word they created themselves. or something.
Inviolables. Okay. And, yeah. But they always, again, they were different. They were doing like instrumental, like long instrumentals on their records. So immediately they were kind of not entirely fitting the mold, right? They weren't doing like Dark Throne stuff.
Yeah.
They weren't doing Demu stuff. Like if you look at the sort of the big popular bands across black metal in the late 90s and stemming from the early 90s, you know, you're looking at like Mayhem, Demu, maybe Marduk, maybe Dark Funeral. Like all those bands, you know, are kind of in your face every other year with a record, right?
Yeah.
Emperor,
especially Emperor. I would say these guys are probably maybe closer to Emperor than any of the other ones in terms of like what they were thinking about, in terms of lyrical stance, and not necessarily being entirely Satan, you know.
More like
more of a philosophical view
yeah.
on Satanism.
I think of like
Satanism
With
being-
Strength I Burn as like a really interesting philosophical sort of statement of like strength and things like that, but it's like done through not like a cookie cutter Halloween style of like evil or something like that,
Yeah.
or even something like supernatural even,
Yeah.
you know.
But I think by the second record, which is Carved in Stigmata Wounds, that's when they started to kind of break out.
Okay.
But I mean,
I see a big leap like with the Seven Bells record as well.
Seven Bells is the breakout record. I mean, in terms of the trajectory, you can even go back to Privilegium.
Yeah, that's another one.
Probably is where things started to crack in terms of them becoming sort of less dependent on the genre itself and becoming more like a natural, like their own vision.
Yeah. What influences do you think start to permeate on those two records the most that sort of change the paradigm for them?
Influences.
I mean, we hear like on the song we're going to play like Fields of Nephilim and The Mission and some of the kind of Joy Division-y, you know, that kind of era
I think it's
of
all
stuff.
that stuff. I think it's Pink Floyd. I think it's, you know, probably Sisters, probably Joy Division.
Even like early pornography
Bauhaus,
Cure, Bauhaus,
The Cure for sure. I think all those things were becoming more acceptable to put into metal.
Yeah.
At that point. So, these guys, again, very accomplished musicians, especially now that they've... the Sun record is really good.
Yeah, Sun, which is what we're going to play, Man Behind the Sun from the Sun record.
Yeah.
And that was the first one you told me to get, even like a couple of years ago, I feel like.
Right.
Maybe a couple Christmases
and,
ago.
If you listen to this, you kind of can hear where maybe they're taking a cue from Tom Fisher.
Yep.
A little bit.
There's a lot of monotheist type kind of sound
right.
and triptych kind of sound on them.
Which is interesting because Michael Zetch is the guitar player for Secrets of the Moon, who's then connected to Victor Visantura.
Yeah.
Who's now, obviously, who's not now, who is the guitar player / producer engineer for Triptychon. So there's a little bit, the thread is getting thicker.
So rundown for people that have been trying to kind of keep track of this, Michael Zetch?
Zetch.
Which bands is he involved in? Because he's got his hands in a lot of different things, correct?
Well, I mean, he's the main guy in Secrets of the Moon, right?
Okay.
One of the guitar players. He's not a session player. He's not a live player.
Yeah.
So he's been in that for a while now. Hold on a second, figure it out. Maybe 5 years, 6 years. I can't remember. Let me see.
Does everybody have fake names?
Yeah, they go by their sort of Ariach, which is funny. So
I just feel like his name has come up a lot. That's the reason why I'm kind of asking.
It has, because there's a connective tissue between all this.
He's like a Dan Swano kind of, like, he's like, oh, Dan Swano's in that band? Oh, Dan Swano did that?
He joined on Seven Bells.
Okay.
He's in a band called Odem Arkarim.
Okay.
Who I'm not that familiar with. But he's a live guitar player in Dark Fortress.
Okay, that's where I thought.
But he plays bass.
Got it.
In that band. He played keyboards in Dordida, which is the ex-guys from Romanian guys in Nagor Bunget.
Okay.
He played bass in Nagor Bunget. He plays live guitars in Runes of Everast.
Got it.
So
and in the Triumph of Death thing.
Currently. And then he's in Triumph of Death, right?
The sort of Hellhammer offshoot thing from Triptychon.
And then he's the unnamed member everyone's unnamed in Ascension.
Okay, yeah. So he's all over parts 1, 2, and now 3.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to draw for the listeners.
Then now, if you want to continue this little thread,
he has a side project, Crone, right?
I don't know about the Crone thing. I mean, I know the Crone thing. I don't know if it's
a side project of someone in Secrets of the Moon. I know that. I read that somewhere. But.
But he did vocals on the Shamash Contradiction record,
which we talked about. Shamash. Yeah.
He did vocals and guitars on Triangle.
Got it.
He did the Ebo on Sulphur Aeons and Sulphur Aeon.
Which we'll be getting to.
He was actually on
soon
Triptychon.
In this episode.
He played guitars in Triptychon on as a guest track. And then he was on Woden's Throne in 2009 as a spoken word. And they're a British sort of post-black metal thing.
And one key thing here, Michael Zack is also a prolific comic book artist.
Is he?
Yeah.
Do you know who?
Mike Zack. He used to do covers for Punisher and G.I.
Wait,
Joe.
this is the same guy?
No, but they have the same name.
You freaked me out. I was like, yeah, I remember Mike Zack from like the Punisher miniseries in the 80s.
Yeah, remember you didn't see him in the 90s? This is where...
Yeah. Oh, fuck you. You almost blew my mind there. Or we could go with Rick Vetch. Remember? Yeah. He was also a comic book guy.
So, like, if you want to continue with him, right, I mean, not to toot his horn too much, but, he was mixing and mastering for Bolzer. Right?
Okay, that's interesting. I wrote down Bolzer as being a potential thing I heard on Chapel of Disease a little with the Cabalter Talk and Bolzer.
Dark Fortress, he did mixing for. He did engineering for Nagora Bunget. He did engineering, mixing, mastering for Shamash on Triangle. So he's responsible for the sound of Triangle.
Got it.
The end sound. Same thing with Secrets of the Moon. Runes of Beverast. He did recording, producing for Triptychon and Milana Chismata. So he's pretty well established. And there's another band that he did, I think they're German, Adesto, yeah. They're Finnish American apparently. He did some work on them, but they're on WTC Productions.
Got it.
So he's fairly, he's fairly out there and spread wide throughout this sort of playlist that we're putting together.
Yeah, and that's why I just kind of wanted to draw that attention and stuff. So So Seekers of the Moon, I mean, where do they rate for you in this? Are they up there near the top of this kind of German, the pile
For sure.
that we've sort of made here?
Yeah.
Because they're kind of up there for me, and I just didn't know if you
sure.
kind of had some of the same kind of effect with them, you know. So
Yeah, I think that they have a vision, they have a presence. They don't really sound like anyone right now.
yeah, I agree.
So yeah, they're definitely at the top of the stack.
Yeah, and for old school Amorphous fans, I'm curious if you hear what I hear. I hear like a kind of Twinilla type riff in this song we're gonna play called "Man Behind the Sun," and maybe I'm crazy, but if any of you also hear that, let me know that I'm not crazy so much. So, all right, well, let's get into it. We're gonna get into the Chapel of Disease. We got "Song of the Gods" from the record, and as we have seen the storm, we have embraced the eye. Then we have Secrets of the Moon with Man Behind the Sun from the Sun record in 2016. And then we're going to end with something that's kind of speaking of palate cleanses, this is a little bit of a palate cleanse after a couple of kind of complex, bands. Valborg. Sorry. With
Valborg.
With would you say Stossfront?
Stossfront.
All right. And Endstrand is the name of the record from 2017. We'll talk more about them when we come back.
wide, not blinded by the lights. It seems so long that I followed him down the laddish way. Once I distressed him, it got darker with each day. Sometimes when it's dark, she kisses my lips with a vermilion. His mouth is like a flame, and my tongue is torn and bleeding. And as the spirits gather in the coldness of the fields, I started waving red flags. And through the black morass I fled, I shot, I fell. Nowhere to find my
was Vandenberg. Just kidding. Valborg. Stossfront from the Endstrand. What are
Endstrand.
Endstrand. All right.
Yeah.
We had Secrets of the Moon with Man Behind the Sun, and then we started things off with Chapel of Disease and Song of the Gods. So, Valborg.
Yeah. Valborg.
Yeah. Chris keeps
chef or something.
Yeah, Chris. I'm very. I'm self-conscious now of my
You
pronunciation.
just pronounce everything like you're Italian.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I've got a Mediterranean slant at. Yeah, I only know the Romantic language. I don't know those harsh Germanic languages.
The Nordic languages.
Yeah, like English. I mean, yeah. So tell us a little bit about these guys. What does that translate to? The song title and some of that. Do you know those?
Stossfront? I have no idea.
No idea. Okay.
Endstrand is beach or edge. So the edge of something, like a cliff or something.
Got it. All right.
Precipice, perhaps?
Stossfront?
It sounds like something I've heard.
It's STOS. So,
yeah. Don't worry about it. Not a big
I can
deal.
look it up.
Well, but these guys are coming out of a kind of a different thing, kind of almost like I said, a palate cleanse in a way. A lot of
Stoss is shock. Okay, that makes sense.
okay.
So shock front, which is like like shock and awe.
Oh, all right, cool, got it. They've been around for a little while. This is like their second or third record, right? I think.
No, it's sheesh, they have several records.
They have several.
This is their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth record.
Sixth record?
They actually have a new record coming out this year.
I heard the new single.
Zentrum.
Yeah, I listened to the new single.
Yeah, good.
But we've got kind of a Triptychon type worship here. What are some of the other things you kind of hear? So there's definitely industrial bends to some of what they're doing.
Well, this record is an outlier. So
Okay.
Compared to their previous catalog, so romantic, necrodepression, barbarian.
But I feel like with the new song that I've heard, this seems to be more the bend that they're going towards.
Yeah, it is. They're going for more. It's almost like a militaristic sound that's kind of of a bygone era. It's kind of like this sort of old industrial sort of sound. And industrial, I mean, like War Machine industrial, not necessarily like factories and shit.
Not like Ministry or Nine Inch Nails industrial.
There's that too, but it's very subtle.
Okay.
Right. But I think I just get this feeling of old factories producing weapons that were for a war and a mentality that is now long since gone.
Which is something that's interesting because it is something as a history person that I can kind of associate with Germany, the Prussian war machine and some of that kind of mentality, certainly in the 20th century, a little bit of that. So where did you kind of come? This is a band I found before, I think, your influence. I don't know how I stumbled on them. It might have been Dan Zadar or somebody had posted a track and I kind of dug on it and was like, it's worth it.
On that Lupus Lounge label too, so I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was that or something.
Well, I think I posted about them when this came out. I was listening to this record pretty heavily when it came out.
Okay, maybe it was a post from you that
and I just like the fact that it kind of hit a button that doesn't really hit for me very often, which is just really very simple. I
was going to say it's streamlined.
It's streamlined, economical, but it's heavy. It's got this like grit to it that's just like wow, and heaviness to it that's like this is pretty interesting. Like it could have been like I told Mark this earlier. In some ways, there's a bit of that like what Entombed did on the Dusk EP, where it was just like so stripped down but so heavy. That
super compressed, like
right
before.
Is that Shreds of Flesh?
Dusk, Shreds of Flesh.
Yeah.
And,
so I kind of like liken that my experience to this Valborg album to that Entombed Dusk EP, where it was just a fist to the face, and that's all it was. It had all the elements that you knew you liked before, but it was just a little different expression.
What was their stuff like before? Because I don't know a lot of their older stuff.
I guess heavy experimental doom. I guess.
Really? Oh, okay.
I guess it's it's not. There's still some of the stuff you hear today in this, but.
Which I guess there's doomy aspects because I pick up on a little Frost and Triptychon a little bit, and
sure.
I mean certainly there's doom elements to Frost and Triptychon. Like plotting, heavy, thudding kind of riffs and things like that.
There's been industrial stuff in Frost
that's
and
true.
Triptychon as well.
True.
So goth stuff.
So this just streamlined that a little bit more and kind of made it more punchy, right? Because most of the songs seem short and very punchy in a way.
Yeah.
Well,
they do have they do get compared to Triptychon. They do get compared to Celtic Frost, the sort of the second generation of it.
monotheist.
Monotheist, right?
Yep, for sure.
Not very
And
nice.
that could be, very well intended by them to sort of sound like that. But I hear, a little bit more willingness to sort of go a color outside the lines, I guess. Because, Tom is very, I guess, specific about his vision. And he doesn't really color outside the lines too much unless it's really pre-planned and kind of vetted.
Yeah.
Which is even worse than vetted, because then he's sort of pre-vetting the idea, thinking over it, laboring over it, ruminating on it, and then eventually he acts on it. So
one of the things that's cool too, I've picked up on, is they have a cool aesthetic to the band in terms of the artwork and the covers.
Yep.
Well, I remember looking at it in the car. There's no information in the booklet at all.
Yeah.
It's just stark red, black, and white. And,
It's
so you look at those primary colors they're toying with: black, darkness; red, alert; white, potential purity, or the opposite of black.
Yeah.
Of course, there are also colors of the German flag, the German Nazi flag.
Yeah.
But we're not going to. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's really.
Yeah.
I don't think.
But those are
touching.
also colors that are just powerful.
Yeah, they're
intentional
powerful,
colors.
iconic colors that easily that blend well together.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the side of this murder in the front row. Black and red, they go together.
Yeah. Well, White Stripes did that really well aesthetically.
Yeah, right.
Played
So
a whole career off that.
So it's a visual that sort of keys into our primary response.
Demands attention.
We look at it, we go,
Stop sign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Red, white,
right,
you know.
Yeah, and I would defer
so-
to Mark to if what your thoughts are on how they kind of laid that out. If you
I kind of figured, just mentioned it,
Yeah.
but it's all, it's just it's more imagery than information.
right.
They have this. It almost looks like a xenomorph, from Alien.
With like a
skeleton
World
or
War
something.
II skull, with a World War II helmet on or
But
something.
then the nose is the radiation symbol.
Yeah.
So it's just it looks like some type of propaganda.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Post-apocalyptic.
Yep, that's probably
propaganda.
actually, instead of me bringing up the Nazi thing, that's probably a better way of looking at it. It's more sort of fictitious propaganda.
Yeah.
Some kind of an easy message for people to kind of say, "Oh, that's dangerous."
Yeah,
By
and
just
you
by
probably
simply looking at
associate it because we've looked at so much German propaganda examples
history, yeah.
historically. That kind of automatically goes there. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of a cool band and a new album to sort of look forward to in
Yeah, the
2019.
new Zentrum, I think, is coming out shortly.
Well,
So,
it's named after the vitamin.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Centrum
I
sulfur.
think it just
but
means
yeah.
center. So,
So,
I've only heard one track so far, but I know I think I have got the.
Have you seen the cover yet?
I have not.
It's
I looked
black,
at it.
white, and red.
Yeah.
It's just like a guy with beams coming out of his
Yes.
eyes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
I saw it. I listened to the new song on Spotify last week, and they
Okay.
had the cover there and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So again, they're going off this very sort of minimal theme, minimalistic artwork. Curious to see. It comes out in May, so in a month.
I like when a band can keep, because many, probably more than not, I think most bands that have a long career have a terrible consistency to their artwork.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see bands like this pulling off, very, very consistent shit.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
not like Paradise Lost is all over the place.
Yeah.
Priest has good and bad,
Yeah,
Mostly
they-
bad.
They're fairly consistent for a lot of it.
but they had that one era where they had the same kind of artwork.
Defenders and Screaming
Yeah.
for Vengeance, Turbo, and
Yeah. But now they're into embossed stuff.
Yeah.
Metallic
They probably
embossed.
don't care. Yeah,
Well, Firepower sort of seemed like
it's not terrible.
they were trying to go back to the early '80s.
Yeah,
kind of.
I just
approach.
appreciate the intention, especially of Triptychon.
Yeah.
There are these Geiger images, and even Celtic Frost had a certain outside. Well, even Vanity Nemesis is interesting of its, on its own, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now we kind of turn our attention to one of the other bands that I think stood out a lot to me when you sent me this list, which is Sulphur Aeon.
Yeah.
I just actually picked this up yesterday on vinyl
The new album,
at the Beer and Metal Fest that we're recording these at. The Scythe of Cosmic Chaos. I mean, that's
Scythe.
Scythe. No,
Yeah.
Scythe.
yeah, Star Wars on the brain, dude.
Yeah, sorry. The Scythe. Sorry. I hear and that cosmic chaos alludes back to something we talked about in part 1, which was, some of the morbid angel lyrical approach, the, whether it's H.P. Lovecraft or the Sumerian stuff. And those immediately are one of the bands that jumps out is Morbid Angel, Blood Incantation. This sort of style of kind of epic death metal that's twisted and atmospheric. I mean, where do these kind of, these guys kind of come into the fold, and are they connected to anybody, or how did you first kind of encounter these guys?
I saw the cover art, to Deep Down They Sleep, which is the first EP,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, whoa, what is that? Because if you look at the cover art, it's like this underwater fortress, and there's like a whale swimming through it. It's greens and blues, very sort of underwater, fortress, Relia,
It's like a sea gravy, like a flooded benediction.
Yeah, so I think
cover.
it's supposed to be Relia, which is Cthulhu's city, right? So they're all about Cthulhu, as you can tell by Deep Down They Sleep.
That's got to be probably the most, all-encompassing, like, at least in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Cosmic horror,
Yes.
all this kind of shit. It's
Right.
like, that's... Lovecraft would be very happy with his influence on
Well, I
something
think-
not,
Well, so
literature.
it's funny because you mentioned that, because Tolkien has obviously a metal influence on everything.
Yeah,
But now Lovecraft is starting to become far more, like almost as pervasive.
and it's just a concept that you can go
Anywhere
real far
with
with.
it, yeah.
Yeah,
But I
it's an
think
interesting thing.
that's a sort of a play maybe on where we're at as like a sort of human society, that we've become, the old ways of scaring us with traditional sort of horror elements and Halloween elements has become so passe, and it's sort of very much a byproduct of like the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
Even black metal sort of pushed those limits in terms of what you perceive as being scary. Nowadays there's almost like a kind of a charmingness to sort of the like Florida death metal kind of style of like gore and different kind of things like that. And I think that as we as a society like kind of approach this kind of precipice of like whether it be the environment or like fucktards like Trump like leading countries into like death and destruction and like chaos, that I think Lovecraft's idea of sort of existential terror like becomes more and more prevalent,
And just like step back and see, like, we don't exist. We don't matter at all.
Yeah, we don't matter. And it's not like, like things were simpler in kind of a way until like say the end of the Cold War, where you had this kind of pervasive good versus evil, sort of like you could understand the world in this sort of diametric dichotomy. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, it seemed to be kind of a like a peaceful period in the 90s, where it seemed like maybe we're on the verge of kind of a brave new world, globalization, the Cold War is over, no one's going to blow each other up. And then, 9/11 obviously shifts the paradigm a little bit.
But then business becomes the guiding force of society and fucks everything up.
And I think that, maybe the only thing that left to sort of scare us is this sort of idea of like, we know nothing, there is this sort of existential dread and this kind of cosmic chaos to like the universe, that when the universe is done with us,
like we fucked up things so bad that at a certain point, the old gods that were here before will come back and kind of claim what was theirs.
And so I think you see a lot of metal bands turning to that, maybe because metal has always tried to poke the bear of like, what does at our heart give us fear, what is horror, what is what is scary to us.
Well, like human psychology and this type of stuff has been like the most interesting lyrical themes I think I've experienced lately.
And it's weird too to think that Morbid Angel was like on that in such like an early era, when like the rest of their peers and contemporaries were doing like more traditional sort of like gore and like Satanism, like Halloween versions of Satanism almost.
It all comes from the Necronomicon book, though. Even their little symbol,
for sure,
hexagram thing.
I mean, I don't know where you weigh on this, Chris, if you've seen this pervasive rise and kind of Lovecraftian kind of.
It's definitely become more pronounced as.
But do you think it's maybe exists more in scenes like the, say, German and the French scene, which tend to seem like more philosophical?
I don't think so. I think I think it's just in scenes that, or people who read the books, understand the mythos and want to sort of parlay that mythos and the mystery of H.P. Lovecraft, whatever he created, and then I guess, take it from there. I think it's. I don't necessarily think it's a German or a French or an American thing. I think it's
I didn't mean that. I meant scenes that tend to be more like highly intellectual or metaphysical. Or gravitate maybe to that, or no?
It could be there, but that seems a little tenuous, I think.
Yeah.
I just think that they happen to latch on to Cthulhu as their thing, right? So when you look at the album covers, you look at the next one, The Swallowed by the Ocean's Tide. I remember when I saw that one, I was like, "What? That is an insane cover.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the best metal covers I've seen in a long time."
Well, even like that's what
it's Kulu emerging from his tomb.
Sure.
In Relia, and just the sheer artistry of it, the colors, the depth, the detail is, to me, I like this better than most Seagrave things I've seen lately.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's got a detail to it that I think is far superior.
There's a depth, there's an atmospheric perspective to this as well, where it seems way more vast than Seagrave stuff.
Yeah.
Is.
Well,
I love Seagrave. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but even the vinyl that I picked up yesterday, one of the things
did you open it up and look at it?
One of the things that attracted to me, Mark can maybe grab it because he has better access to it, leaning against the wall there. But it's this idea,
who's the artist, anyways?
Then we'll find out.
Same dude.
It's not Per Olofsson. Is that the guy?
Yeah, but I mean, you sort of look at what's kind of going on, and it's like the kind of thing you want to own on vinyl almost, just because of how like incredible some of the artwork and things like that are.
Right.
It just seems like it's been well crafted a little bit. But in terms of like the music sort of stuff, like what else are you hearing with their kind of approach is beyond like the blood incantations or morbid angels, or is that the starting point? Or
well, I think they take the mythos and they sort of apply that to the sound. So you can imagine what Cthulhu would sound like, sort of big, massive, and that's kind of the death metal style they do. But there's also a creepiness to it.
I love this picture of the band in there. He's just like, I don't know.
He's
sermon of the Necronomicon or something like that.
No, he's calling Cthulhu from.
There it is. Yeah.
From the depths.
Metallica started it all, man.
Awesome band names. No, I don't know if that's even band names. No, that's just their job in the band.
What does it say?
So it's one guy is in charge of ritualizations, another guy is incantations, another guy is tentacles, another guy is abysso pelagial pulse.
Bass player.
Yep. And then you have the Yugathian
nocturnal pulse.
Yugathian chords.
Yugathian,
sorry.
Yeah,
my Lovecraftian pronunciation is not up to par. So, I know, Mark, you've done kind of stories based on Lovecraft and things, for...
Yeah, I've done an adaptation of Dagon.
Yeah, I was going to say, you did your own thing, right, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a... he doesn't give you a whole lot there, but he gives you a lot to think about, which is the most interesting thing of...
Yeah, Ola I think the guy's name is Ola Larson.
Yeah, that stuff's great. I've never come across his stuff before.
Yeah, that's cool. So were they interconnected with anyone? Did they come from other bands, or are they wholly original?
They did, but I think they were very not known.
No one that we've mentioned thus far, obviously.
As far as I can tell, no.
Got it.
I mean, we can...
The other thing that's really interesting about Sulphur Aeon, and Mark was commenting on this when we were driving around yesterday, and I wrote it down too, is there's a lot of bright major chords throughout, like Sulphur Aeon.
It's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
Given the weight of their subject matter.
Yeah, it's just... It's interesting. There's a lot of cool melodic overtones, some bright major chords. You've got this kind of twisted, atmospheric kind of approach to things. Mm-hmm. And I even said something that stood out to me in this Sinister Sea Sabbath, which is the song that we're going to be playing here, is there's some kind of tremolo riffs at the beginning that made me uncomfortable in a way, and I'm curious what you think about this, like the way some of that mid-period Gehenna like kind of makes you like Admirian Black and some of that, like where remember how like those records like Hate Work and Hate Work? Was it Hate Work? No, Hate Work's a Morbid Angel song.
Yeah.
Devil's Work.
Devil's Work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like
they're just oppressive.
Where like there's like something like uneasy about it. Like it really does get to like a real horrific place. Whereas a lot of that stuff seemed to be more like Halloweenish. Like I got like a more serious thing. Yeah, Murder record. Jesus. Admirian Black record, and then what was the record right before Admirian Black? It was their third record from
Malice.
Was it Malice? It
all
might
the
have been
naked
Malice.
People in a swirl.
Yeah, that sort of like weird, like body horror, Cronenberg-y looking sort of thing, or whatever.
That would be the one with the naked chicks on it.
Is that Were They Naked? I don't know.
Yeah, just a ton of naked people on it.
Yeah. Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But they're kind of in this like weird like ritualistic pattern or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of pretty cool.
Yeah, Miriam Black is the one that's.
That's the one with the dude sitting on the front with a gun in his hand, and he's just
dead chick.
killed his girlfriend. Yeah.
It's very reminiscent.
Gehenna like really always brought like I remember playing that song for people that wanted to be scared of something. Like, if you want to hear something scary, like let's listen to Devil's Work because it makes you feel like uneasy. You know.
Yeah.
So.
But
I don't know.
Just the lyrics alone in that one.
Yeah,
are
for
pretty,
sure.
And the pain in this life, and the pain in this life. Yeah.
Yeah.
You made 1,000 lies. You believe in paradise, and just the way he says that is like. Okay.
So really, what we should be talking about is we should do an episode on how Gehenna created breakup core for
breakup core.
metalcore in the early 2000s. You know, which people that we used to like hang out with were way into breakup core. You know.
Yeah, I never really seen
Red
that.
Roses for Blue Lady or whatever.
That stuff does not hold up.
Yeah,
well,
that doesn't age well.
Oh, I know. But I'm just saying, like that was like a scene there for a while. So, I think it just merged at a certain point. The emo core, where it was just like whining about your girlfriend. But
Yeah.
this takes it to the next level.
Oh yes.
So, anyways,
Sulphur Aeon. Yeah.
back to Sulphur Aeon. All right. So, any other sort of thoughts on those guys as we sort of approach them for people that are unfamiliar with it?
I think if they like good quality death metal, done right, done the German way, I guess, which means like if you like early Morgoth, you'll like this. If you don't know who Morgoth are, then you'll like Sulphur Aeon, and then you can go back and get Morgoth.
Get some Morgoth. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just good quality death metal with a very sort of very specific message or a specific visual message, which is that of Cthulhu. And you can just stare at the covers for ages because there's so much crazy stuff going on in it.
Yeah, neat stuff happening for sure.
And they're paintings, which is nice. It's not like a Photoshop construction.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah.
All right.
Well, they respect the art enough to not even put their name on it.
Yeah, that's true. The covers
just a
sort of
sticker.
speak for themselves a little bit. Yeah. So, all right. So we were going to be going into some Sulphur Aeon with Sinister Sea Sabbath from the Scythe.
Scythe. Yeah, Scythe.
Scythe of Cosmic Chaos from 2018. Then we have another kind of palate cleansing, kind of fun band that we just decided to insert in between kind of two really crazy songs, which is a band called Burstin Out, named after a Venom song. We'll chat about them just a little when we come back, but it's called Speed Hounds from Hell from the Outburst of Blasphemy record. And then we'll sort of end with something brand new that Chris recently discovered right as we did this, and that is...
Come on.
Scythe. You're really throwing me off.
Yeah. Scythe
lore. Behind
hot off the presses.
Behind Seven Walls and Seven Gates from the Through the Mausoleums of Man record. So we'll come back and talk about those. Enjoy.
Just me to bleed. Back to the sound of a black mask speed. Nuclear strike, the atomic raw. Come on, you bastards, open the door. Burning temptation, isn't enough. We got the power, let's break the cross now. We will unchain the powers of hell here inside. Oh, hail a spell. Oh, speak out from hell. Running through hell, faster than sound. We break the chain, we are unbound. Venomous nightmare, the poison bites. Heavens of fire, come turn the fight. Satanic vengeance takes us higher. The burning flesh, ripped by a fire. Now we will unchain the powers of hell here inside. Oh, hail a spell. Oh, speak out from hell. Yeah.
That was Scythe lore with Behind 7 Walls and 7 Gates. We had Burstin Out with Speed Hounds from Hell, and we started off with Sulphur Aeon and Sinister Sea Sabbath. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Sinister Sea Sabbath from Sulphur Aeon. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those last two things there that we just kind of heard, I don't know a lot about Bursting Out, and I don't know if you kind of know much about it
before until you put that in the
Oh, really?
place.
That's very funny. I think this one might be the Dan Zadar one, where he was just like, if you like Venom Worship, check this out, and it just kind of hit me in the right mood, and so I grabbed it. I mean, there's really not a lot to say about it if you're a fan of Venom and bands like Midnight and some of the retro kind of thing that's kind of happening. They certainly the whole album is very consistent in that. I think they even do a Venom cover on that record, the Outburst of Blasphemy, which sounds like a ode to Sodom and different things like that. So it's if you're into that kind of stuff, definitely kind of go there. And you wanted to mention something before we move on to Sith lore and kind of finishing things up about the Sulphur Aeon thing, a kind of connection back to other things that we've been kind of building the narrative around.
Well, it was I think it was produced and mixed by Michael Zech, our famous dude that we've been talking about.
Okay.
And also mixed and mastered by Vicentor and Michael. From Triptychon.
Yeah.
So again, German scene, German guys doing doing the work of a scene, which is pretty interesting. That these guys are slowly embedding themselves in the scene itself. Right.
Now, is Tom still living in Switzerland, or is he relocated?
I have no idea.
I didn't know if he was maybe relocated up to Germany, where a lot of the other Triptychon guys were.
I would assume not. I would assume he's still in Switzerland.
Yeah, he's still in
always
Switzerland.
been in Switzerland,
Okay.
as far as I know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, obviously he comes from the Swiss, the German-speaking part of Switzerland.
But they did a lot of recording in Germany. Like Monotheist was recorded in Germany.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think were they associated with Noise Records, which was out of Germany.
Yeah, I mean, all the early stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so it's kind of an interesting kind of connection there that you want to sort of throw out. And then this last thing we just heard there, that was something. How did you run across that? Because it was something.
It was service to me as a promotional record. So
what label's putting that out?
Boy, you really.
Yeah, I know. Well, if you said it was service to you, I thought maybe
it's like you got a journalism degree.
Yeah, I know.
Don't know. Hold on a second. I mean, I get hundreds of things a week.
Oh, so. Sure, no problem.
What I was immediately first thing I was interested in is that I saw German.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. So if they're not even Metal Archives right now. That's how
That's
how new they are.
Yeah, I looked it up and it wasn't even there.
Let me get to it real quick.
One of the things that sort of jumps out, immediately in that song is the Swedish kind of roots of some of what's kind of going on, and not Swedish in terms of like cookie cutter, just normal HM2 kind of stuff, but like really go into like the sloppy rawness of the early Carnage and Grave, Into the Grave, and sick bass leads. Like you can really hear this like just booming, thick, kind of stuff happening there.
It's coming out on Iron Bonehead in June.
Okay, is that
the 12-inch EP and mini CD? So I got to make sure we order that one.
Okay,
that'll be one that goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah, I bet.
As far as I can tell, they're a new band. Is the press quote is trying to be mysterious as well by saying, not for nothing, this power trio named Scythe lore. This beast is being hurled into the world with both stealth and mystery. So I assume they're another band that probably doesn't have its membership known.
Got it. Yeah. Cool punkish kind of beats as well too. There, which obviously was a huge influence on that Swedish scene early on.
Yeah, the D-beat stuff for sure.
Yeah. And even like a cool little doomy part that I said kind of reminded me of like Stranger Eons or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely showing a lot of cool personality there. So, and then that kind of leads us to sort of our conclusion, which it's been. It seems like because we put these 3 episodes together and kind of over the past few days, we've been talking a lot about obviously German metal, but for people listening to this kind of in more spaced out patterns, maybe not so much. We saved one of my, I think, favorite bands, and I think one of the more unique bands that is Son of the Sleepless. And so record called To the Elements, and the song The Owl. So go ahead, Chris. The floor is yours, and I'll give you my thoughts, I guess.
Thanks.
So
this is the guy. Son of the Sleepless is the same guy who was doing Imperium back in the 90s.
Okay.
So
Yep.
Schwadorf, I can't remember. Let me see. Yeah, Schwadorf is his last name. Ulf Theodor Schwadorf. So he was doing Imperium, back in the 90s.
And also the Vision Bleak was another band that was connected to him, but I don't know anything about those.
The Vision Bleak are more of a gothic kind of thing.
Okay.
Kind of a, but they're good. They're
like
good.
a gothic and like Diabolique or Bay Laurel, like that kind of thing, or
sort of, but
Okay.
very, more of a German slant to it.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
was Crematory a German goth thing?
Yes, they were
In a bad
gothic
way.
death metal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gothic death metal.
In a big way.
Then he's involved in another band called Noek, or an Autumn Blaze. He did live stuff for Dornenreich, who we probably should have mentioned at some point during this podcast. Now we have.
Are they German?
Yeah, they're German. Actually, no, they're Austrian, so that's probably why I didn't put them on there.
Yeah. Damn Austrian and Swiss kind of mess everything up.
Borders and borders.
Yeah.
The Grenzgänger.
Grenzgänger.
Yeah, just a little Gripney there.
Oh yeah.
That's
Okay.
the border cross.
The border, yeah.
Border
Yeah,
ghost
dissolve,
or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Borders, yeah. Anyway, involved in Avigheim, which is also another gothic metal thing. But his primary fame, claim to fame is Imperium.
Got it. And I don't know them. Were you guys into them?
I
at
don't
all?
remember. I mean, the name sounds familiar, but
Yeah.
can't think of anything about it.
Yeah.
Were they around 90s, you said, or early 2000s?
90s, yeah, 90s.
Okay.
Yep, 90s, yep. So they had a record, probably the most famous record that came out in 96 called A Winter Sunset. And Mark, you probably remember this cover. And Jason, you probably remember this cover because we had it at the record store a couple of times.
Yeah.
And every time we had it, it sold out.
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
let me see the cover. Okay. Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like something that would have been on like avant-garde or
Exactly. And
or
this is
something
like, it was like a gold print
Yeah.
on the
or it would have been like Misanthropy or something
Yeah.
like that.
Holy
yeah.
Records.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So,
So his recording studio, is that where... Have we talked about that at all?
no.
The Kleinschmied Studio E says frequently collaborates with Prophecy Records.
Yeah.
Prophecy Productions.
Yep.
So a lot of bands are going there recording.
So he's got that angle as well, I guess.
Right. But some of the Sleepless, was something that originally starts in 99. Then it gets weird. Like, it kind of gets into trip hop.
Huh.
And then...
Which is interesting because one of the bands I kind of hear on this record is like early Ulver.
Well,
You know what I mean? Which
so-
is kind of an interesting pathway that they,
Right. So, when I interviewed him for this record, he had a very specific reason for doing what he's doing here. Was it's a rebirth in the classical, in what he calls in the classical sense. It was on hold for a long time. Didn't really think about it all that much. But after they finished the Vision Bleak's The Unknown record, he kind of sort of wanted to start writing more black metal riffs again. Inspired specifically by the Norwegian black metal bands Burstin, Darkthrone, Underfuneral Moon, Panzerfaust, early Ulver, Emperor. They've been his absolute favorites when it comes to that style of music.
Yeah.
Also, early Norwegian black metal educated him as far as music, writing music and stuff. So that's why you hear a lot of Ulver in Son of the Sleepless, because he's being sort of taught, more or less, by how the Norwegians are approaching that music, that style of music.
It's funny because we're playing The Owl, but another song I love off this record is a song called Motions. And what I wrote about it is I said, Motions sounds like Nathan's Madrigal or early Burzum if it had really good production. Like, you can hear, it doesn't sound as raw as those because this record has great production.
Yeah.
But it's, there. Like, the roots of it are there. In this song, The Owl, like I said, it kind of has, a hybrid of, early Satyricon mixed with, early Dance of December, Brave Murder Day type, For Funerals to Come, Catatonia, almost. Those kind of two worlds sort of mixing together. Along with, more folkish things, maybe, Heart of Ages in the Woods kind of pops in a little. Early Moonspell even is sort of in there. I hear some Wolfheart kind of riffs built into that and some of the melodies that were on those early Moonspell records.
This dude looks like he's in Moonspell.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's in gothic metal, so
Yeah, there you go.
But I mean, he was around back then for that black metal thing.
He was also he did session stuff on Bethlehem and Dark Fortress. And
Okay.
as
Yeah.
well,
So there's more of that connection.
there's-
there.
The web
So
is big.
when I asked him what drives him musically for Son of the Sleepless, he says definitely early Norwegian black metal and folk music.
Okay.
I've always loved the natural mystical music of Lorena McKennitt, not black metal. Early Third and the Mortal.
Lorena McKenna. Okay, yeah, I remember her.
Lorena McKennitt, yep. Carrie Ruislatten, Oliver Kazell
Third and the Mortal,
Singer,
cool.
yep. And the like Dead Can Dance's Larger Than Life sound is also ongoing inspiration for me. I love that. I love music that transcends, that lifts you up, and has the power to change something within you. Call that spiritual if you want. So when you hear the owl and you sort of think about that for a second, it does have this uplifting kind of mentality to it, even if it's aggressive and there's a kind of this sort of like there's a spark behind it. There's something there, that you can kind of key off of, which is what I really liked about that record.
And what this song too, the other thing that jumps out, and it's a band that I never really gets much attention, and maybe it's just me hearing it in it, but also I love this. I think it's one of my favorite EPs ever. Is that Thy Serpent Death EP?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a pretty rare one.
It's rare, but it's like it's incredible. Much like the EP that it kind of mimicked, the Catatonia Sounds of Decay. Mm-hmm. And when you hear that Sounds of Decay, what's interesting is because it had better production than Brave Murder Day. There are moments on those 3 songs on Sounds of Decay that are like, even though it's coming out of like the doomy kind of genre, it's almost like triumphant and uplifting a little bit. And I can hear that in the Son of the Sleepless stuff. That same kind of like brighter sort of approach. Even
it's like trying to break through some.
Yeah, it's like the spiritual sort of folky quality. Even though it's kind of like you said, it's kind of coming from early Norwegian black metal. Kind of roots and stuff, but. It's a cool song. It's a weird outlier record too, because I don't know. It sounds like a lot of the things we've talked about, but it's completely its own sort of unique thing.
Yeah.
I mean, would you associate them with anyone that we've really talked about?
Thy Serpent.
Thy Serpent. No, not Thy Serpent. I'm talking about Son of the Sleepless.
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, apart from the bands that Mark mentioned of being involved in, I think he's fairly this is a fairly individual project.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not going to be something that he's sharing or sort of letting spread throughout the scene, I guess.
Sure. So as we bring this to sort of a conclusion, I know one of the questions I had, we already kind of talked about, which is the surrounding scenes in Austria and Switzerland and how they're interrelated, but I think we kind of hit on that a little bit. As we sort of like walk away from all of this, what are your thoughts on kind of where the German scene maybe is heading in the future that you kind of see, or just any closing kind of thoughts that maybe you didn't get out?
I mean, if anything, I hope the quality continues to be consistent or get better, and I think it will. I think it'll get more diverse. Hopefully, as bands inspire younger generations of people to write music, hopefully they're not just copying what their peers are doing, but also exploring. I see that kind of happening. It's sort of inevitable. We like what we like, and we're going to kind of, if we want to copy Entombed, how many bands have copied Entombed and not really done their own thing with it?
Yeah, that you remember.
That you remember, right? So that's what I kind of see. I just see it getting better, and I think if bands like Secrets of the Moon, Son of the Sleepless, Sulphur Aeon, Chapel of Disease is more of a younger band, I guess.
Nailed to Obscurity.
Nailed to Obscurity is if they continue to write good music and grow, then I think it'll continue to be impressive, and at some point it'll be there'll be a thing called the new wave of German metal or something, that kind of thing. That kind of
not kraut metal.
No. I hope not.
But you can't use that term anymore.
I'm trying.
I hope not. Kraut metal doesn't come to thing, because I think it's a bit weird, but. I think it's something that may start to manifest itself as a wave, but it's so diverse that it's kind of hard. Maybe it's waves.
Like the one thread that goes through the whole thing is this, like, intentional intellectualism.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole thing, which is not real common in large scenes of metal like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it could be just because they're educated.
Could be. I mean, Germany's known for their, introspection and things.
For sure.
Also.
Right.
Psychology and all that. So.
Do you see a horse in the race in this? Like a band that you think will be the first to maybe break out a little bit and maybe kind of bring more attention to the scene? Like, if you had to, like, place your money on somebody?
I thought it might be Secrets of the Moon, but it might be someone like Nailed to Obscurity, who are Nuclear Blast.
Because of the promotion they'll get?
It just depends on how much they tour.
Visibility, probably.
Visibility. Do they do something that really excites people?
Yeah.
That's probably going to be what contributes to someone kind of coming out on top.
Gotcha. Well, cool. I hope that for the fans out there, that we've spotlighted some of these bands. I mean, it's such a diverse palette that you're probably not going to like everything, but that's not the point. It's just this idea that there's so much kind of underground things happening in Germany in the last couple decades.
It's all good.
Yeah, you have a lot to pick from depending on if you're a black metal person, death metal person, atmospheric person. There's a whole buffet to sort of draw from. So. But Chris, it's been really awesome. Obviously, we always enjoy when Mark and I get to kind of hang out with you in person instead of just kind of calling you up or having you Skype in or whatever.
Facebooking or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so we do appreciate this. I hope this kind of went the way you hoped when you kind of originally kind of thought about putting together some of this sort of stuff.
I just wanted to spotlight some of the bands that I was really enjoying and not being able to share as much as I normally would. So
sure,
it's that we're doing this is great,
and hopefully this will put those spotlight on some of those bands a little bit and get some new fans out there and stuff. So let us know what you thought about any of the parts or the totality of what we've sort of done. Shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Leave us a comment on iTunes. You can subscribe there if you haven't already, or if you just kind of stumbled on this and you want an easier platform for you, Spotify. We are up on that as well. You can go to the website to listen to a lot of the old episodes.
You can just stream straight from there. You don't have to use any apps.
There you go. Yeah. Requiem Podcast or requiemmetal.com. You can get merch. You can get Mark's artwork, old episodes. You can sign up for Patreon there, or you can go to patreon.com.
Pick up that Dagon book.
What's that?
Pick up that Dagon
It's not
book.
a print.
Oh, sorry.
If you guys want to get it, if you guys want it really bad, we can, maybe do another Kickstarter and get it. But it's been out of print for
But I think it might be nice, pertinent kind of material for some of the things we've talked about.
I've got the PDF I could put up online for people.
Yeah, listen to some
maybe just
H.P. Lovecraft music and read some H.P. Lovecraft. Stuff.
Listen to some Sulphur Aeon and check out that Dagon book.
Yeah, there you go. What I'm trying to think of great H.P. Lovecraft movies we got. In the Mouth of Madness, kind of an ode.
Is one of the best. Oh boy.
Yeah,
I'm drunk. I have a bunch and I can't think. One of the best is the Stuart Gordon movie, From Beyond.
From Beyond
is probably the best.
And he's the guy who did Reanimated, right?
Yeah, which is another Lovecraftian.
Yeah,
almost his entire output is Lovecraft.
Is Stuart Gordon stuff?
Yeah,
that he did.
Yeah, all of his horror movies are Lovecraft.
Yeah, so definitely get in the mood.
He did Dagon as well in the 90s.
Oh, that's right.
It has terrible CG, but the rest of it's great.
Yeah, I remember hearing when that came out, but I never saw it. So. But yeah, anyway, so we do appreciate all that sort of stuff. So check us out, Facebook, Twitter. You can also kind of find us as well. And thanks once again, Chris. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
So for Son of the Sleepless, the Owl, I am Jason.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Chris.